It's on, is it? Right, if we can all settle down. Welcome to the full council meeting, 7th of July. Welcome to elected members, staff, members who are online, and also the thousands who are watching this online. Item number 2 is council blessing. Councillor Hanford.
Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aroaro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua pai mo ngā hapori i mahina i mātou. Me kaha o ki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
I'm impressed this was delivered without looking at your notes. Yeah, well done. Item number 3, apologies. I know we've got one from Katie Spires. Anybody else? Not aware of. Who's on Zoom?
We have Councillor Ivanoff, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Randall, and Councillor Compton.
Okay.
And then I'll probably speak. Councillor Elliott and Councillor Elliott.
Okay. I move that the apologies be accepted. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hanford, thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Carried. Item number 4, declarations of interest relating to items of the agenda. I have not been informed of any. There's no. Item number 5, presentation of petition. There's no. Item number 6 is hearings. We're not having any. Public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. We have one speaker. I believe it's Mika Havel, the Free Fares New Zealand, talking on the item 10 of 1 Free Fares Remit Local Government Annual General Meeting. She's on Zoom. Mika, welcome.
Kia ora. Good morning. Yeah, I'm Mika. I'm here on behalf of the Aotearoa Collective Public Transport Equity, the coalition behind the Free Fares campaign. We're a group of over 70 climate groups, churches, student associations, poverty action groups, and disability action groups, and councils calling for central government to fund free public transport for tertiary students under 25s, community service card holders, and total mobility card holders and their support people. So I wanted to talk to you today to bring your attention to the remit put forward by Porirua City Council to the LGNZ conference this July. I've sent a copy of that remit to the public forum team for you to read over, and think it gives you the opportunity as a council to, through LGNZ, join the voices of thousands of New Zealanders who are calling for public transport equity already, and it costs you nothing. It's awesome how supportive Kapiti Coast District Council has already been for this cause, and it's an opportunity to continue some of that advocacy on behalf of your communities to push for equitable, climate-friendly transport solutions. Over the course of working in this campaign, for me personally, I've had the privilege of working alongside many people in the Wellington region who face cost barriers to public transport and who would greatly benefit if they were removed. I know a student friend of mine who has to commute in to university and can only afford to do that 2 or 3 times a week because of the transport costs, which impacts her ability to learn and connect with her university community. Supporting this remit costs council nothing. All it asks is for council to use its voice to advocate with all the other councils to central government for this ask. It's a great opportunity for council to continue to stand up for representatives of their community and continue advocating for this cause which they've already supported in the past. The majority of people in Aotearoa support climate action, and many local authorities have declared climate emergencies, so has central government, and it's an opportunity to act on and honour some of those declarations. I just want to acknowledge how awesome it's been to have Kapiti Coast District Council's support with the sort of pushing for climate action and equitable transport already. Just wanted to bring this remit for you, just notify you about this coming up and why it's important. So I'm happy to take any questions and have a discussion about that.
Thank you, Mika. You know, the item is going to come up later on in the first report that we're going to be considering. In any case, are there any questions from councillors? No, doesn't seem to be. So thank you very much. Just stay online. It's not showing.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, but I need to see this on my screen without breaking my neck, turning around all the time.
So Councillor Randall first, and then we'll pop up Councillor Elliott.
Councillor Randall first, then Councillor Elliott, is it? Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm a bit disappointed you couldn't see me. I mean, I know I'm vertically challenged, but it's not that bad.
And I'm black.
Mika, I support you 100%, but I'm looking at it not just from a student perspective. We have many older people in our community who have taken advantage of the current government proposal to reduce the airfares, which they're not going to continue with. And many older people have hospital visits and appointments at Wellington Hospital. Sometimes they have to use a taxi because of their mobility. And actually, if they have a mobility card, they can get a further discount on the current charges. So definitely, the feedback I'm getting from the residents in Paraparaumu is they're 100% behind that. But they're looking at it from an older age perspective.
Yeah, that's really awesome and fair to point out. I think it's really cool that during off-peak times with a Super Gold card, people over 65 can travel for free on public transport. But it is really important that people, particularly people who qualify for mobility concessions and people on lower incomes, which we know there are older people who are also on lower incomes, are able to access those support services that they actually need. And our ask isn't specifically to students. It's also for community service card holders. And there are many old people who qualify for a community service card as well, particularly those old people on low incomes who will really struggle to access those services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Kia ora, Mika. Thank you for coming to speak to us again. I'm trying to work out, it was maybe 9 months or a year ago that you came and spoke last time, and I immediately got in touch with your coalition spokesperson. And what I was seeking was advice about what limitations would be put in place on your proposal to ensure that it wasn't taken advantage of. For instance, my teenagers are quite delighted in it because they think they can get on a bus and go to Oakuni skiing for the weekend for free. And potentially it also left the window open for taxpayers to be paying for people to go all around the country to concerts for free. I can't see that any limitations have been put in place, but maybe you could help explain if they have or not.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So the targeting that our ask targets specifically under 25s, tertiary students, community service card holders, and total mobility card holders and their support people. And we know these are some people who, these groups of people really often rely on public transport to get where they need to go and to access essential services and education and employment, and often don't have the funds to access it. So that's the core aim of this, is that those people who really need it are able to have that mode shift towards a more equitable form of transport. In regards to that being taken advantage of, I don't see that being a major issue. I can see around under 25s how teenagers would be able to use that to get around. But having just recently been a teenager myself, I would be quite happy to go out using public transport on a trip to Oakuni to go skiing. I don't think I think that if we allow, particularly our young people, the opportunity to have social mobility in this way, it ingrains habits of public transport use, which I think long term will serve us as a wider community in New Zealand really well, as a transition away from private vehicle use towards more use of public transport in our young people. And in regards to it being taken advantage of for people moving around the country to get to concerts and things, unfortunately, I don't think our public transport system is quite good enough for that to be an issue yet either. The sort of connections between cities and large areas I don't think exist yet. And I think for the particular groups that we're targeting, that's not the sort of thing that they would use free public transport for. From the feedback that we've seen in our campaign, increasing social mobility in this way allows for people to access education and access employment and access the GP when they really need the GP. It's these sorts of things which people will use a service like this for if it were made free, rather than taking advantage of. That's the that's the sort of information that I have from the campaign side.
Thanks,
I don't want this to become a debate.
Can I just have a supplementary question then, just
Go
to
ahead,
query?
be careful.
Is it, are you proposing this is limited to metro or regional use, or it is nationwide still?
What do you mean?
Are you still proposing that rides are not be limited to metro or regional boundaries, that they are able to be used for people to travel the lengths and breadth of the country using buses and trains?
Yeah, so like with public transport, we would include all public transport. So trains, for example, in our Wellington region that go from Kapiti Coast to the city would be free for our target groups.
What about Kapiti Coast to Auckland?
I think it would depend on whether the government, whether that would fit in within the scope of the government's criteria. And that's ultimately, I think, up to them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Right, thank you. Councillor Hansford.
Yeah, kia ora. Just have one kind of quite general part or question about where the campaign is kind of at, like what other support or what other support is needed, how can we as elected members continue to support the call, and how much traction do you feel like you're getting with central government and with the minister, and yeah, how can we continue to amplify it?
Yeah, thank you. We've had really good communications with the minister so far, I think, and the main thing at the moment for elected members and councils across the country, the main thing that can be done to support the campaign, I think, is supporting this remit at conference on the 20th of July. Getting that, I think, across the line would be huge in terms of putting pressure on central government. I think traction-wise, it's been really heartening to see how much public transport has been talked about in the media recently, and that sort of conversation gaining traction. It's been really cool to see public transport made half price for community service card holders permanently in the budget this year. So there are definitely steps being made in the right direction and traction being built. But I think continuing to unify people and sort of build some connections with community and hear feedback from people is a great way to increase pressure on the minister and keep building traction and keep pushing for this cause.
Thank you very much, Mika. No other questions. Just keep watching us. The item will come up on item 10 soon.
Thank you for your time.
We're now on to item number 8, members' business. First one is public speaking time responses. That will be covered in item 10. Leave of absence. Any leave of absence? I'll be out of the district tomorrow and back on Wednesday. Pardon? No, we don't. Can I have a mover for mine? Come.
Would you like to move in a seconder or your leave of absence?
Pardon?
Would you like to move in a seconder for your leave of absence?
Well, I'm just asking. So moved by Rob, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Thank you so much. Because previously I've objected to other people. Matters of an urgent nature. I have not been notified of any. Mayor's report, there's none. We now come to item number 10. The first one is 110.1, the Local Government New Zealand annual meeting. I have a procedural motion on that one, that we add a late item from Local Government New Zealand Remit 6, which you all have got a copy, but I just need to tidy that up. So I'm going to move for that item to be included. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hanford? Thank you. I just caught your eye. I thought you said yes. All those in favour say aye. Thank you. That's done. Steffi.
Kia ora koutou. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, this report seeks a decision from Council on whether it supports the remits at the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting that is going to be held on the 28th of July 2022. And as the Mayor has said, there is an additional remit that has been added late. We only received that on Tuesday morning, and I forwarded the new report on to all councillors. It's around polling local government New Zealand members, and basically that remit suggests that Local Government New Zealand adopt a policy to poll the membership on any significant issues affecting local government prior to making a decision. So the recommendations in the report are for remit 1, 2, 4 and 5 for you to support those remits at the meeting, and for number 3 council officers have suggested not to support the remit. In regards to remit number 6, there is no clear view either way from council officers whether to support or not support. So it is up to you to make a decision on whether you'd like that to be supported. And recommendation A is also for the Mayor to be sent as the delegate for this council.
Right.
I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions at the moment to start? Just a comment, I've never had in my experience in sort of last minute entry of a remit at this stage. It's very unusual, but I can understand why they would have bent over backwards to land this one. So any questions? Martin, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. Through you, Mr.
How are you feeling?
Oh, not too bad. Apparently, snoring like a banshee, but other than that, with a woolly headed and a bit of a wicked cough. But we're in early stages yet, so we shall see.
Good luck.
My first thing is, I'm sorry, I haven't received this remit 6, or I've missed it, so I can't vote on that. I have no idea what it's about. My apologies for that. The other thing is, I note that remit 5, we're being asked to support in principle. I would like potentially for that particular remit to be perhaps voted on separately, as I'd like to ask for that to be updated to full support in regards to the vaping clustering as such. Is that a possibility at all?
Let me just get a clarification. The use of the word in principle it's only for us to understand that as in principle, because I think the Deputy Mayor reminded me there's, when we are at the conference, there is no in principle button separately.
Right. Okay.
Either
So
we vote
we
yes or we vote no. So basically what he's saying is, in principle, is our understanding that's on the base of the general principles that we support it, but it means support. That's what
yeah.
it
Okay. If that's fine then. That's me. I'm happy to support it then as it is.
Cool. Any other questions? Doesn't seem to be any other questions. Councillor Randall.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, thank you for recognising me. I've been waving my hands and doing all sorts of exercises to grab someone's attention. But
Councillor Randall, let me just explain. The arrangement is now, the technology seems to have caught up recently, that those on Zoom, the names will appear on my screen here, then I can pick up on it. Otherwise, I have to turn around and try and find out what's happening, who's got the hand up and who got first. But
okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, I disagree completely, and I'm surprised by you, Mr. Mayor, seem to agree not to support illegal street racing. I mean, I've written to you, and you've responded.
Hang on a moment. That's not correct. I haven't said. This is a staff recommendation.
Okay, sorry.
I, for your clarification, I totally support what you're going to say.
And I know,
and I acknowledge that you have raised this issue with me, and I've raised the matter with the police.
Okay, so unless it will be changed, I'll be voting against that.
Okay.
I think we should be supporting.
Have you got a question to staff on this report?
Well, they very well know they were doing work at the moment on Ratanui Road, Otaihanga Road, and there are other areas that these illegal street racing change, as you know, Mr. Mayor. Through our
Councillor Randall, if you've got any particular questions, we will debate the issues later. This is just to ask staff if you've got any specific questions or clarification or whatever it is. Like Councillor Martin Holiday asked on the issue of the word principle.
Well, I'm interested. I've got the question on not to support. That's the three-letter words that I'm concerned about.
Okay, so we will discuss that later. Any
okay,
other questions?
Thank you.
No other questions. In terms of managing this, shall we just go through each one? Pardon?
Coming up on the screen.
Pardon? I can't.
There are a lot of questions.
They're on my screen. Are they not on your screen?
Well, it's not on my screen. Councillor Coates, I've got Councillor codes now.
Weird. Right, would you like me to go?
Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Remit 3, although I'm not in favour of illegal street racing at the AGM, I am in favour of... no, wait till His Worship is...
Councillor Coates.
So just reading the remit and then the staff response, they sort of seem a little bit in conflict with each other. So the remit itself is to discuss a national working party to look at addressing the issue of illegal street racing. The actual staff response is a little bit different, and it basically just says it remains an enforcement issue and it can be managed within the existing framework and so forth. So I'm personally in support of a national working party to look at sort of what tools could be employed to, even if it is around strengthening those partnerships and so forth. So I'd be happy to support that remit.
Yeah, can I just add to that? I know Councillor Randall has raised the issue, and I've been discussing this issue with the police. What I've learned from the police is that there's a culture of boy races, so-called. They are owners of vehicles and they're proud of it. There's a whole culture behind that, and then they go and do the stuff. More recently, what's happened is there are people, young people particularly, who don't own the cars, they steal them, and then they go and do stuff. They do the racing stuff. And on top of that, then becomes other criminal activities of ram raiding. So there's complexity around that. The other thing, of course, we also had a national type committee over the Freedom Campus, led by the able mayor of Rotorua. That was a very good structure and came up with recommendations which was helpful. I agree with Councillor James Coates in terms of this is forming a national body to look into the issues, so-called experts and all that. So if they are wanting to form a committee to design an elephant, so be it.
Yeah, and my apologies, Your Worship, I might not have phrased that as well enough to be a question for the staff. It was a question. I mean, the response is that the regulatory team's view is that it doesn't require any further policy work, bylaws or legislation, but they may not necessarily be some of the recommendations that come out of that task force. It could be around further collaboration. It could be around supporting councils around infrastructure in terms of areas of high risk or something. So is there any response from staff in terms of that particular remit?
Mr. Jefferson.
Just waiting to turn red. Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Thank you for your question, Councillor. This has been an issue that goes back to the early 2000s. Our view from a staff perspective is there are enough tools in the collective partners toolkits to manage this, and former Mayor Crosby will know that we effectively dealt with this in 2006 in Tauranga, a partnership approach, and actually just holding each of the partners to account for their part in the process. So there's plenty of legislation for police to deal with it. There are plenty of legislative tools for us to deal with it via bylaw. What we did in Tauranga City was pass a bylaw that after a certain time at night, vehicles under 3,000 kilos were banned from the industrial area, which is where this was happening. We partnered with police and justice, seized vehicles long before Crusher Collins had introduced her legislation. I just think the tools are there, and if the local partnerships are working well, a national working party seems to me to be a talk fest. Well, my view is that the tools are there already, and people just need to partner and hold each other account to delivery. We were really lucky in Tauranga. We had a very, very proactive collections manager from courts and senior sergeant from traffic, and essentially overnight we managed to rein boy racing and illegal street racing in. So that's why from a staffing perspective we didn't support the remit.
I had a second question, yes. Your Worship. So this one's a little bit more of a curly one, and as always, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But the recent property purchase on State Highway 1, Kapiti Road, is the whole block of buildings do we own there? Is that correct?
Sorry, Councillor. So that's the corner of Kapiti and Amario, the old State Highway. Yes, so that entire block, basically anything that isn't currently being developed as part of that subdivision there, is in the ownership of council, yes.
Is that reference to this report?
I guess to clarify, it is because there's a vape shop in there, and we're potentially supporting a remit with a strong view around vape shops. So as a landlord of a vape shop as a tenant, I'm not saying we shouldn't support the remit, but just something to think about.
Good spotting. I've got Mr. Butler.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you, can we just have a very quick overview of Remit 6? Because it appears that some of us haven't seen it or been able to see what it is.
Yes, absolutely. It was sent very, very late, and I apologise. We didn't get it any earlier either. So the short snippet is that local government New Zealand adopt a policy to poll the membership on any significant issues affecting local government in Aotearoa prior to making that decision. And local government, New Zealand should develop a policy in conjunction with the membership that sets out the threshold for polling the membership. And in the interim, the decision about the threshold for polling rests with National Council. So in essence, it is the New Plymouth District Council that has proposed this. And around the background, they note that in July 2021, the President and Vice President of LGNZ signed a formal heads of agreement with central government for partnering commitment to support Three Waters service delivery reform. And they have released a joint position statement on the Three Waters reform. And they're basically saying that it wasn't discussed with councils in detail prior, because there were 67 mayors pushing back against this plan. So this is how this has come about. And as I said before, council staff don't really have a strong leaning on whether to support or not support, because there are benefits and disadvantages of that approach. Does that answer it?
Yep, great.
I've got Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Firstly, Your Worship, I'd really appreciate these recommendations being taken separately. And secondly, on the 18th of May, councillors expressed concern about the vehicle-related crime wave in Kapiti and other places, and we wanted some collaboration with police and other partners. The Chief of Police was on leave at the time at Kapimana. Has this discussion progressed at all in Kapiti on any governance or operational level?
Ms. McDougall, you will want to respond to this one.
Thank you.
Yes, the Mayor convened a meeting with representatives from police and other relevant agencies, supported by staff.
And councillors present.
And several councillors as well. And there are a series of actions that have arisen out of that meeting that I will meet with the Mayor shortly to talk about how we progress.
Oh, thanks. I guess I can't have been invited to that meeting, so I didn't know anything about it. But it'll be good to hear any outcomes from it. Thank you.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the Mayor, just on 15.3 and the boy races. I mean, my understanding, I agree with the recommendation of officers on it, but my understanding is that in terms of things we could do to address problems with that locally, we have all the tools we need. We can change, if we needed to change speed limits, we can put in traffic calming measures and all those sorts of things. And obviously, if there are hotspots, we're able to raise those with the local police for them to I guess have more of a focus on that sort of thing, isn't it? So it's sort of a like you say, it's very much an issue, an operational issue for the police in terms of enforcement and that resourcing, isn't it?
You made that into a question.
Only just.
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'm asking if essentially we can do things around traffic calming and speed limits and that to essentially address any concerns our community would have in that space. We're comfortable that we're flexible enough to do those things.
Mr. Jefferson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the question. Look, it is the success that I referred to in Tauranga was because we had really committed partners, both justice and police and the traffic team at the time there, and it worked really well. There was some really innovative thinking, and I suspect the issues that are occurring around the country are just that those partnerships are not working well or working effectively. So I think there's real value, and I'd be happy to share at any point, as I say, the President, former Mayor Crosby, knows what we did up there, and it was very effective. So yes, in answer to your question, that's exactly right.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Right, we've got Councillor Pravano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I also wanted to make some comments about, comments, and there's been asked a question about 15.3. So I agree with Mr. Jefferson in terms of being able to target, quite confined areas in terms of dealing with boy races. But I think in Kapiti we have a much wider area of normal streets that are being used here. And I actually would like, so it says in 15.3, this remains an enforcement issue that can be readily managed within the existing frameworks. Could I, and I know this is a tough question, but I'd like to see some evidence. Can I please have some evidence to show that this has been readily managed? Because I actually don't believe it is. It is. And I'm not saying there's anyone's fault here. I'm just saying that it's not being managed, but I'd like to see some evidence of that, please, that it is being managed as written in this report.
Again, through the chair, I think staff's response is that there are the tools to manage it. I'm not suggesting that locally it is being managed well. I'm not aware of the local issues here. They don't come up at our Kapiti Emergency Services meetings that we have with police and the other emergency services. So not suggesting it is being well managed here. All we're saying is that there are enough tools in the toolbox, and a national think tank on this might not be the best approach for an already constrained sector. Hope that helps.
So thank you, Mr. Jefferson. So I know that there are, so it's interesting that it's not being raised, but I'm also interested to know whether or not, whether it's not being raised at all through the community patrol groups as well.
Yeah, look, I've just checked with my colleague. Neither of us are aware of a significant boy racer issue in Kapiti. But I'm happy to go and ask the question.
Okay.
Of the area control.
That's really interesting, because I think some people would, when they've got to deal with it on almost a daily basis, there's a different story out there. Thank you.
Mr. Jefferson, I've got a question on the same matter. Your assumption is that a national body of so-called experts, however they define that, would be a talkfest. That is an assumption. You don't know for sure whether, given the changes that are happening in this area, police resourcing pressure on the government in this particular area, the changing nature of the boy races to other forms, which the police has informed me, may come up with other type of solutions. You don't know that for sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's an assumption based on many, many years of experience in these matters. So you add whatever weight you'd like to that assumption.
Okay, then. Thank you. No other questions. So shall we go from A to G, one after the other? Recommendation A. Will somebody move and second it? Councillor Hanford moves. Councillor McCann seconds that. Right of intro? No. Debate? No. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? It's the online. All in favour? All those against? No. That is carried. Recommendation B. This on the public transport funding. Can somebody move that? Councillor Coates move that. Councillor Hanford second that. Right of intro.
Look, just noting the intention nationally and locally to encourage mode shift, and I think any initiative that enables people to use public transport more, whether it be to go to tertiary study or even actually to a party on a Saturday night with safe transport home, I think we should be supporting in terms of our overall commitment to climate change and to address issues of social deprivation and access to transport and education and parties.
Open for debate. Everybody rush through. Councillor Holbrook.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge the work of this group in bringing this to us and the initiative to bring a remit to the AGM. I think it's really to be commended. There's been so much mahi going into bringing this forward. I'm not aware that we have really available public transport to go skiing and to do things like that around the country, so I don't have any concerns around that area. Yeah, and agree that any initiative to support mode shift is to be encouraged.
Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, took all those comments completely, and again thanking the Aotearoa Collective for Public Transport Equity and Micah for joining us and continuing to be a really relentless advocate both to our council but also to councils right across Aotearoa. So definitely when, in Kapiti 56% of our emissions are transport related, it presents a huge opportunity for us to solve the climate crisis through means that also have positive impacts on social wellbeing and social connectedness, as Councillor Coots mentioned. So, looking forward to us continuing to be proud champions in this space. And as Micah said, they really appreciate the work that we're doing to keep this top of mind for LGNZ and also for central government. So, thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this recommendation for reasons that I've already outlined in my questions, mainly that the devil is in the detail, and I feel as though the Coalition has had ample opportunity to have a look at the fine print and start setting some parameters about how this is used. You can indeed catch a bus or a train to just about any ski field in New Zealand, and I just don't think that's a fair burden to put back on taxpayers when it's unlimited. I do, though, support the climate change initiatives that drive out and environmental carbon emission initiatives that drive this. But I have seen, for instance, in the recent consultation process that Greater Wellington put out, that is being addressed really, really well in their own initiatives, and many of which are being duplicated in this one. So I won't be supporting this actual remit. Thank you.
Councillor McCann.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Look, I absolutely will be supporting this. And I thought one of the words that struck me in the presentation was the words ingraining public transport use. I think it is absolutely so necessary that our youth are encouraged to use public transport at every opportunity, so that they don't become the kind of people that we can sometimes be afraid to use public transport because it's not what we did or what we do. We need to encourage that shift, that modal shift. And as a parent who currently provides a taxi service, because I want my children to be safe, and I'm sure parents all across New Zealand feel the same, wouldn't it be amazing if our kids said, no, we're not going to drink and drive, we're not going to smoke and drive, take drugs and drive, we're going to, and I won't say this, we're going to use public transport and do those things, but it is so much safer if we were able to provide modes of transport for our kids who don't have access in the way that we did to driver's license the second you turn 15. And in communities like ours, and especially hearing Councillor Coots talk again, in those communities where they don't have public transport, we should be doing everything to encourage that and encourage the full use of our youth to use them, so that they keep on using them when they go out and start earning money and paying their taxes. Thank you.
Healthy. No other speakers. Councillor Coots, the right of reply. Agreed. So, recommendation B, moved by Councillor Coots and seconded by Councillor Hanford. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against, Councillor Elliott, is it? Carried. Recommendation C. Councillor Coates moves in support. Can I have a seconder? Don't know, Raj. Councillor McCann. Right of intro.
Look, I'll keep it brief, but we've seen numerous occasions where the current funding model hasn't supported our community's aspirations or our council's goals and intentions through our planning. More recently, for example, the funding from Waka Kotahi, where we received a much lower level of subsidy within that area, and obviously the recent decision from central government around the funding for the Capital Connection train replacement is just a couple of examples. So can't quite remember the length and breadth of the remit, but I think any discussion around reviewing government transport funding is a positive one, as they look to understand the tensions that councils carry around responding to issues within their community. And just recently in this meeting we've talked about responding to boy racer activity, and part of that could be potentially through changes to road environs, and obviously that would require adequate funding as well. So it's one thing to say, you know, that councils can deal with that, it's another thing that they have the funding for it. So I'll be supporting this.
Open for debate. Nope. Your right of reply to your right of intro. Great. So recommendation C, moved by Councillor Coates, seconded by Councillor McCann. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Councillor is against. Carried. Recommendation D. Does anybody want to change that, or do you want to test it?
Your Worship, I'm on a roll. I'd like to I'd like to move that we do support the remit, and then I'm happy to speak to that.
I'll second it. Good. Seconded. Right of intro.
Yeah, look, with all due respect to the staff feedback, which I do greatly respect in terms of the individual and the advice given, as a councillor, I've been in the situation where we've had boy racer activity within our community, and the response from the police is talk to your council, and the response from the council is it's a police issue. We have seen frequently within the news nationally issues around boy racers and actually leading to physical assaults. We've fortunately not had that within our community, but that's not to say that we won't. And I'm certainly aware of boy racer activity within our community in the time that I've been an elected member. So, I mean, from as far as I'm aware, the remit is not asking us to commit any funding to the Talkfest. And so if those experts want to get together and have a korero around potential solutions to assist councils in addressing this problem, then I'm all in favour of that. And I'm certainly sure that those within my community would expect me to be supporting this, given some of the issues that we've seen within the district. So I could say a lot more, but I think other elected members may have some to add, so I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Compton.
Yeah, look, I don't think council should support this. I think this very much, in terms of what's being proposed in that remit, sits firmly in central government's wheelhouse. Look, I'll confess to being many years ago one of those boy racers who very seldomly actually came up to this neck of the woods. We didn't have the wonders of Transmission Gully in those days, but I mean, look, I think central government already has all the tools it needs. In fact, police have all the tools it needs. And as we talked about earlier, you know, council has all the tools we need if we want to put in place measures in order to, I guess, reduce the attractiveness of boy races. And I think the one thing we've got to recognise here is that, you know, we don't have the same problem with the big cruising meets that we used to have going back, what would be about 20 odd years ago now, when police started to introduce, or the government rather of the day introduced measures around confiscating cars, and then later, obviously, Judith Collins became famous for crushing them. So, you know, I feel that those mechanisms are all actually there, and it's as James Jefferson was saying, it's about those relationships that we build with police. Who, let's be honest, police are woefully under-resourced, and they can only focus their resources in specific areas for a limited amount of time before they actually move on to fighting the next fire. So I think there's a bigger issue around the amount of resourcing that police have, which is a longer term issue that needs to get addressed. And we see the same thing. You know, we could set up the same working group around burglaries and the huge spike that we've seen in those. We could set it up around any number of things that we could argue that council should somehow get involved in it. So I really, I think that this is something that, if anything, if people have an issue, they need to escalate it to our local MPs and get them to, push for more resourcing here, and then they can come to us at council and we can look at what we can do in terms of our existing powers around speed limits, around traffic calming measures and that sort of thing. So I don't, with everything else the sector's facing, I'd rather that we focus our priorities on things that are, very clearly within our wheelhouse.
Councillor McCann.
I'll take the unusual position of agreeing with Councillor Coots and Councillor Compton, because I do think we do have the resources, but we want to ensure it's not a talk fest. But I think clearly one of the things that may have been raised by Mr. Jefferson is that the experience that he has gone through and that other members in different areas have gone through is that there are ways of dealing with this, and perhaps a short talk fest is needed to actually share some of those ideas so we can move on. So I will be supporting it with that in mind, that hopefully during the session we can raise that point, Mr. Mayor, that there have been solutions, and perhaps it's just the fact that we need people to start talking to one another.
Councillor Holbrook.
Thank you. Yes, the purpose of these remits is to support our fellow councillors who aren't necessarily in the same position as we are. And for this remit to come to council, there must be councillors out there who feel like, even though the tools are in the toolbox, something needs to change so that this problem can be addressed more adequately. So for that reason, I'll be supporting this. I don't think there's any harm in agencies coming together to talk about this issue. And maybe some of the recommendations that come out will be some of the things that Councillor Compton was talking about. So I've got no problem supporting the councils that have brought this to the AGM.
Yeah, I think my step in seconding this motion to support the Remit 3, simply because I think talkfests are talkfests. The very fact that we have got a national level group of people who are discussing this has got value, because this is an ongoing problem. I mean, this problem has been, boy racers problem has been here for decades. But it's a changing beast. And like I explained before, what the police have told me in terms of the different variations now this is taking, I think taking stock and having a national discussion and some of the points that Councillor McCann has pointed out, that out of this stuff may come out. I'm hopeful, despite the vast experience of Mr. Jefferson's police background and local government background, that putting a whole bunch of experts together, and whether they design an elephant or a double hump camel, I don't know. But I'm hopeful that something will come out of that. That's the reason why I'm supporting this. Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification. Are we agreeing not to support Remit 3, or has that been changed?
Well, the Remit will, the recommendation that we are voting on will say that the council agree to support Remit 3.
Okay, so is that what we're going to vote on now?
Yes.
Or? It doesn't show on the screen. It doesn't show that on the screen.
Yeah.
The word not has to be removed, is it? Okay, thank you.
That all? Important point. Okay, no other speakers. Recommendation D, agree to support remit 3, moved by Councillor Coates, seconded by the Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Recommendation E, the bylaw infringements. Can I have a mover? Don't all rush. You're on a roll. Councillor Coates, thank you. That's right. Moved by Councillor Coates. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Holbrook seconds it. Right of intro.
Waived.
Waived. Open for debate. No debate. So recommendation E, moved by Councillor Coates, seconded by Councillor Holbrook. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
So it's carried. Did you say somebody's? Oh yeah, thought so. So it's carried anyway. Recommendation F. This is on the density and proximity of vaping. This is going to be interesting. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Coates, given what you've mentioned.
Mr. Mayor, there was a question I thought that was raised by Councillor Coates, but actually wasn't answered. So can I ask, if you forgive me, is there a legal issue with us supporting this? I thought there was a question in what he said, but I don't think it was answered.
I doubt there's a legal issue to that, but there may be public perception issues involved in this, perception-wise. But doing legally, I don't think there's an issue because you've got a tenancy agreement, obviously a leasehold agreement. Anyway, would staff like to have a response to that? Can you phrase that? Okay. Yeah, but Councillor McCann has raised the question of legality, and I think we need to resolve that. So can you phrase your question, Rob?
Oh, no, I can't. I can't quite remember how it was phrased, and Councillor Coates is not saying it was a question, so I was just wanting some clarity from staff. Is anything with it? Sorry.
I think it's a perception issue now at the moment.
I just wanted some clarity. Is anything that we're agreeing to here possibly not in alignment with the fact that we are a landlord of the kind of premise that we're talking about?
Yeah. My response to that, if needed, is a perception issue, whether that's the reputation of the council, but this is going at the moment is procedural. We are just it's got to go to the national level. But I agree the fact that what James has raised and pointed out, there's a perception issue. I think we can live with that. Staff, have you got a response to that?
Only to follow up with the comment with regard to the lease for that particular premises was already in place when council took ownership of it. The remit relates to proximity and numbers of vape outlets. I think not totally banning them. So
and you can't because it's a legal commercial activity.
Yes, so in terms of the again perception and whether that's in the right location. Might be part of that conversation as part of the if that remit follows through into some sort of.
So it's generally, I suppose, it's a matter that can be reviewed. Okay. Did I come to a point of who's Council Court? Who's moving it? Nobody wants to move this. Council Coates, thank you very much. You moved it. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hanford. Councillor Halliday, I see your name's popped up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is Councillor Coots saying anything to start off with?
Councillor Coots has moved it.
Sorry, Martin, I just saw your hand up when no one had moved it, so I just wanted to just let them
I
know.
was just going to move it, that was all.
Okay.
But, you've done that. I'm happy to just speak.
Sure. Would you like me to do right of intro then, Your Worship?
Yes.
Look, I guess to clarify, again, my reading of the remit was around the density and proximity was pretty clear, and so raising the issue of the vape store within the building that council currently owns was partially around the perception, as His Worship has mentioned. I had assumed that possibly that lease was in place when we purchased the building, but it does raise an interesting question for council, given the views around the vape stores and obviously through here. And what I would say in reading the detail behind the terrible example up in, I think it was Kaitaia, from memory, I haven't got it in, where was it? Dargaville, sorry. Yeah, that of the number of there within a 1 kilometre range. The reality is that youth under the age of 18 are getting access to vapes, and also recent research out of the United States, although I haven't validated it, does raise concerns around the impact, the health impacts to people through the use of it. So happy to support the remit, although it does raise an interesting situation for us as a council supporting this, given that we're a landlord of a tenant that sells vapes. So for me, it's just putting that out there. It's certainly an interesting one.
Right. Open for debate. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I definitely support this remit. I note that the government has announced the smoke-free environment and regulated products for a smoke tobacco amendment bill. And I was talking to council officers recently about this in regards to the updating of our policy. The aim of that bill is to prevent young people from uptaking of smoking, and I see vaping as a back doorway that's been utilised to bring our youth back into nicotine. As Councillor Coots has alluded to, this is a big issue over in the States. A lot of young people don't realise that vaping has nicotine products in it. I'm not saying that all vaping does, but it seems to be exceedingly unregulated at the moment. And I think we need to be front-footing this. I do note, talking to council officers, that we will be updating our smoking policy this year. Unfortunately, I've found out from the regional manager for Stop Smoking Services that we're a little bit behind the eight ball in this regards in relation to the local territorial authorities. So I'm very much looking forward to the updating of our policy. And just note the government's policy of being smoke-free by 2025, which is pretty damn audacious, to be honest. So yes, I think we need to front foot this, and I guess the reason I'm supporting it is it's more that awareness and just bringing that profile up, that this is an issue that's sort of, it's not something the community is necessarily bringing to our attention at the moment, but I think it's one that will grow and grow until it does become a problem, and I think we need to be proactive in this space. Thank you.
Right. Anybody else? No. So recommendation F, moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Hanford. All those in support, say yes, say aye. Okay, thank you. It's carried. Now, recommendation G. This is remit number 6. We have no, and rightly so, we have got no recommendations from staff. So I'm open for any councillors taking giving us the direction. Anybody want to move in support?
All right, I'm happy to support it. Having had a quick read through it, my understanding is...
Hold on, you're supporting it. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Boswell.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Councillor Coots.
Look, I'm happy to support the remit, and I should have asked a question earlier just around, but that being said, I'm still happy to support it just in terms of, you know, whether it is how the polling aspect would potentially work, you know, in terms of one vote from a council and so forth. But I think the general thrust of it, given the examples, has merit, and I think it's worthwhile having a discussion at the AGM about it. So I'm happy to support it.
Right, open for debate. Everybody's rushing in. No, Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, look, I completely endorse what Councillor Coots has just said. I'm happy for further discussion around this. I'm picking that this is in relation to the terms of reference that the LGNZ signed with the government around Three Waters reform, where they couldn't, basically local government had certain restrictions put on it, or what it could and couldn't say, and generally had to be in a supportive role. I think hindsight, it's a difficult one because obviously this approach, the LGNZ being involved in government was years before council actually got involved. So one could ask, one could sort of say, well, you know, we rely on LGNZ to look after our interests. So they got involved. It's a bit like the situation we have now with Three Waters, whether we get involved and try to make a difference or we don't. But I think it certainly needs further discussion with regards to how this potentially works for this large-scale changes that governments tend to push towards us. So I'll be supporting moving forward.
Councillor Holbrook.
Yes, when I first started reading through this, I did have concerns about it shackling local government New Zealand in terms of its relationship with central government. But I'm inclined to support it because of the statement, they will generally be of widespread public and media interest and will have strongly varied views across the country. So it won't be every time LGNZ has to negotiate and form agreements with central government. It'll just be on those issues that are contentious and important. So, and it also further notes that the polls shouldn't limit the ability of LGNZ to achieve their objectives relating to working with central government and advocating for local government. So with those things in mind, what this is suggesting is setting out a policy so that if those really sticky, important things come up, like Three Waters, LGNZ is committed to engaging with its membership. And I think I do have a concern that that didn't happen around Three Waters. There was a small working party with not all all the councils represented on that working party, and potentially there was a lack of ongoing communication with local government as those discussions progressed. So with all that in mind, I'll be supporting this, noting that there's a lot of work to do on this policy to make sure that LGNZ remains nimble enough to have those conversations with central government that are so important to the sector.
Did you just thumb the table?
No, I did it as square.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to echo what the Deputy Mayor was saying, I think it's one of those things where LGNZ does a lot of good work on behalf of the sector, and they've got a really good track record of that. And on the whole, they're generally nimble enough and responsive enough to what, I guess, where the sector's thinking is on various things. But I think there's some real genuine concerns that have been raised about how the organisation has handled their position and actually their public comments around Three Waters as well, and the position that they've put themselves in almost between central government and local government. And I was thinking the other day, where LGNZ made a really weird comment, insisting that people who wanted to comment on the Three Waters reforms, they had to have read the Water Services Entities legislation. And I thought to myself, my God, they're kidding themselves. I promise you that. Sorry, the son's here, homesick, and decided to make noise. But I guarantee you that most MPs in Parliament haven't read that legislation. Most of the ministers who are responsible for it probably haven't read every bit of legislation. So there's almost this. LGNZ was almost digging in over the criticism they've got on this. So I think it's important that the membership of the LGNZ sends a message to them saying, hey guys, you did get this wrong in terms of where you position the sector on this, and we'd actually like you to revisit how you handle these sorts of decisions. I know that having worked in member-based organisations before, that this approach is actually manageable. And as the Deputy Mayor said, it's all where you set that threshold where you allow the organisation to be nimble enough to do stuff, but actually they know where the threshold is to come back to their membership and say, hey, this is a really controversial issue. Where do you want us to stand on it? Do you want us to provide you advice to inform your submissions to the government on it, or do you want us to lead in this space and come up with a position? So, it is workable, what is suggested in the remit, but there's obviously a whole lot of work that needs to go in that space. So, definitely agree with the intent of this remit.
Okay, no other speakers. Recommendation G, that we support remit 6, moved by Councillor Coates, seconded by Councillor Buswell. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? No. Anyway, it's carried. Right, so that covers all the recommendations and covers this particular paper. Thank you, Steffi. Thank you, the staff. I think we need a 5-minute break. Thank you. Falling asleep? Falling asleep?
No, I saw the agenda for the first one on Friday. I saw the presentation, what was the street raising. I just